Are you struggling to advance your career and sacrificing time with your loved ones because of endless to-dos, low energy, and just not enough time in the day? If so, then this podcast is for you. I am your host, Dr. Ann Sung, an ER, critical care, and space doctor, a peak performance coach, real estate investor, and a mother of a toddler. I'm here to guide you on mastering your mind and give you the essential skills to achieve peak performance. So welcome to Productivity MD, where you can learn to master your time and achieve the 5 freedoms in life. Hello, welcome to Productivity MD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Ann Sung. And over here, we have Dr. Arpita Gupta De Palma. She's a retired pediatrician and also the founder of ThoughtWork MD. She's also director of Virginia Eye Spine Physicians, co-host of Doctors Living Deliberately podcast, mother of 2, and also a real estate investor. So welcome. And, thank you. The reason I wanted to bring you on was because, you teach and coach on how our thoughts affect our essentially reality, and to be a peak performer and to be productive in all aspects of life. And we're talking about relationships, work, professional setting with your spouse. I really want to dig into how our thoughts, how we can structure our thoughts so that we can be at the peak in all aspects. So thank you again for coming here. Can you tell us why you do what you do currently? How did you even get into this field of work?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been amazing getting to see your journey as well. I think, honestly, it just kind of happened. And I know it sounds very cliche now, but I got into this work because COVID made us have a hard stop, and a pause and the opportunity to reflect in what was in our life and what we wanted to create in our life and bring into our life. And so with COVID, we own, like I said, I'm a co-founder of the medical practice, Virginia Eye Spine. It's my husband's practice, and we do interventional spine care there. And we had to shut it down with COVID. Reopened after 8 weeks and kept everybody on payroll, didn't get a paycheck, pulling out of our savings to pay for everybody. And then all of a sudden, within 3 to 4 months after we reopened, we had almost 100% staff turnover. And, up until then, I'm a pediatrician. I wasn't actually practicing at that time, but up until then, I just kind of thought that everything in life was happening to us. And that led to me being very reactionary and angry and upset and frustrated when things didn't go our way. And so I had to really kind of give myself that opportunity then, which was talking to one of my best friends who was a coach and complaining about all the things that were happening, where she gave me the kind of the window for the first time of, hey, this is how you're choosing to think about this. Do you really want to keep going that way? Because look at what it's creating for you, this anger and this how you're showing up with your kids and all the things. And so that's when I started to look into this coaching, because of course, as a physician, very, productive, high functioning, efficient person, why the hell would anybody need a coach? What is this? I don't need somebody to tell me how to do life. I can do life, right? But the key is we were doing life in a way that wasn't really happy, bringing joy, contentful for us. And so I gave it a chance and learned about coaching, joined a group, and that's where my mind was really blown, where I started to realize that we are totally in control of how we're choosing to think about all of the things that are happening in our life. And those thoughts, the way we think about things, ultimately impacts how we feel, and how we feel drives how we show up and what we create in our lives as a result of how we're showing up. And so that's what kind of started me on this path of, let me learn more about this. Wow, this is really, truly impactful. There's a little bit of wow, factor to this, that I can't believe we didn't know this before. And I want to share this with other people. And so that's kind of what started it. I went into a coach certification. I started my business at the same time, not really planning on that. And then it just kind of blew up into what I really love talking about and where I wanted to kind of learn more for myself and how I like to share this information with people. Physicians are near and dear to my heart because obviously I'm a physician, I'm married to a physician, and we are struggling, quite frankly. And so this is who I really wanted to speak to and reach out to help.
Thank you for that. And I just for the audience to understand a little bit, I wonder if you could give us an example of what it's like to be reactionary versus what it's like to be aware. And you could maybe do an example of personal or maybe an example of professional, because I feel like if you're not aware, like if you're reactionary, then you're not aware. So if we're talking about this, they might not even know that we're talking about that scenario, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Totally. Totally. Okay. So a great example for me, anytime we would have employees that maybe didn't do what they were supposed to, or we've trained them over it, we've shown them, we have SOPs, we have whatever, and things were just not getting done, I would be irritated. I would get angry or frustrated. It came to a head where with my one of my thoughts was I'm sick of my dependability being dependent on that of others. I.e., if these people don't do their job right, or if these people don't show up, then it's a reflection on me, and I can't be dependable because I'm depending on them to help kind of build the steps up to where I need to be. And so what that would translate into is me being very angry. Like I would get upset with this thought that I'm sick of my dependability being dependent on that of others. And I would be frustrated and pissed off and angry. And I would show up that way when I was interacting with those people. I would bring it home to my kids. I'm frustrated after a long day at work and they do something so minuscule. They didn't pick up their shoes from the mud room. They didn't pick up their clothes from the floor. They didn't do whatever chores. And I would blow up at them. And so that's reactionary because we're already on the path of going down this anger route, this firm, strong, well-established neural pathway that every single time we have an event that activates us or makes us upset, we go down that pathway because it's so much easier. So that is reactionary. It's like an automatic response that we've started. It's like a learned habit that we've become so comfortable and familiar with because we know what's going to happen at the end, even if it doesn't necessarily feel good. The responsive, instead, is where we kind of are aware of what is happening and we give ourselves that pause, that moment to reflect, the moment to really think and consider other perspectives. And so, in that situation, when an employee doesn't do what they're supposed to do, rather than getting pissed off that I've shown this person so many times, I don't understand what is the disconnect here. I wonder why this person is not getting it. I wonder why she's showing up this way. So putting in that moment of pause to allow that ability to have some curiosity, to consider other person's perspective, to consider how it's coming up, what emotions are coming up for you when you're thinking about it, gives you the opportunity to decide, do I want to keep going this way or do I want to shift it a little bit? Do I want to consider another perspective? And that's when we can be more responsive because we've given ourselves that opportunity to take a pause. So I think that kind of is, yeah, it gives you an idea of what I mean from reaction versus responding versus reacting to somebody.
Yeah, it's those are two great scenarios so that it gives a definition of what we're talking about. And, why should people even care about this transformation or transition? I wonder if you can maybe share maybe some of your clients or any stories like, what changes could happen in their lives that they actually take the steps needed. Because a lot of times we're reactionary because we just don't care. We take care about ourselves. Actually, we don't care anymore. We're victimizing ourselves also. And it takes motivation and it takes intention to have to force yourself to actually stop and be aware and put down your pride. So the question is, why should people care about this? And why should they actually make the change?
Yeah. I think it's interesting that you bring that up. There's a couple of levels to this. Like the immediate why for me, like in that scenario with how I was showing up back in 2020 was I wanted to have my relationship with my kids. Like my daughter was a junior in high school then, my son was a freshman, and I knew they were going to be leaving the nest. And the way I was showing up was not conducive to us having a relationship where once they left the house that they were going to want to come and spend time with me. Like my ultimate goal is that these kids want to be with us. They want to spend time with us. And so that was my immediate why in that moment. So I think we can kind of figure out what is the why for that moment for why we want to change and shift. But on a more bigger, broader picture for why we want to make changes in our life or how we're showing up, I think you got to think about what is your compelling why? What goals do you want to aspire to reach? and why do you want to reach them? Like really spending some time reflecting on that for yourself. So for me with ThoughtWork MD, I realized that one of my biggest compelling whys for why I do this is because I want to keep women physicians in medicine, right? We are getting to a point where people are leaving left and right. And I seriously am worried about who's going to take care of my kids, who's going to take care of my grandkids. And I have the luxury of having this amazing physician network, even though I'm no longer practicing. Both of my kids are like, hell no, we're not doing medicine. So they're not in medicine. So I have even more angst around how are they going to have this network of people that can take care of them. So that was one of my major compelling whys for why I want to help women stay in medicine, to recognize the joy that they can create, even if they go to part-time, even if they figure out a way to do it differently. It doesn't have to look traditional, but what can we do to help you be enjoying what you're doing? And then the second compelling why for me was I want to help my husband be able to kind of step down from working in traditional clinical practice so he can create his integrative medicine telehealth practice. And so how do we do that? I'm going to try to supplement our income a little bit differently in a different way so that he has that, cushion where he can kind of relax a little bit and not be feeling the burden of having to support the household. So for me, when I talk to clients about how do you determine your compelling why, it needs to be something that you can think about when like the going gets tough, when it's really like you feel like I'm done, I'm quitting, this is not working. What can you remind yourself of to help kind of keep you going through, pushing through to get through that hurdle so that you're back to kind of an area where you feel like it's effortless?
Yeah, I think I definitely resonate with the immediate why. For us, it's having the awareness of how, especially right now with a newborn of like 1 month old, lack of reactivity with my husband and I is just like gone through the roof. And the compelling why is to make sure we model the type of communication we want our son, toddler of 23 months now, to see. And we don't
Yeah.
want this air of, I don't know, we're not arguing, but it's like an air of not kind maybe, or not intimate. I think he can sense it. Like if we're
Yeah.
talking about a task not done or a task that needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that what you're bringing up is like a good piece, the part about the awareness there, like just having the awareness that, okay, we've just had our world turned upside down because we've got this small human in our house that is completely changing everything that we're used to. So it makes 100% sense why we are both exhausted. We are not necessarily sleeping the way we did. We're running ragged, probably doing laundry, all the breast milk stuff and the bottles and all that stuff. Who knows? But it makes sense why you guys are maybe more reactionary, why you're spread a little bit thin, why you might be showing up the way you are. So how can you show up with compassion for yourself instead, for each other and for yourself, so you can come in a way that is productive for both of you, right? That's the awareness piece of it, that why am I showing up this way? And how does it make sense? How can I show up and not beat myself up after I recognize why I'm showing up this way?
It's always a work in progress. Just
Yeah.
you have to waiting until the baby goes to sleep, like can sleep like 7 hours or something. And then um so regarding I'm just curious then, what are um your clients, once they are aware and they act what you coach on, the strategies, the tactics, what kind of transformations have you seen, like in terms of the what can they expect?
Yeah. I think the biggest transformations, almost all my clients are physicians. There are a couple that are not, but most of them are physicians. And the biggest, I think, transition is giving themselves grace, letting go of that perfectionism, because we are kind of raised this way with our training and it seeps into all aspects of our life. And then that becomes the source of a lot of doubt, the imposter syndrome, all the things. So starting to recognize where that's seeped in our life and where we really don't need to have it. How can we overcome that perfectionism? The other area that I think I've had a lot of clients have transformation is just, again, going from reaction to response. Like, how can I just give myself a moment to pause and build my awareness here so that I can choose to show up the way I want to show up in this situation, choose to create the results that I want here. And I consider other people's perspectives, even though it doesn't mean I have to act on it and go with it, but can I just consider that, because that helps me be a better human with how I want to show up. So it's really a lot about being more aware and being more intentional with what we're thinking now and then what we want to create. Um, I've done a lot of work with a couple of women who really just, again, not having that self-worth, so they're undervalued, they're underpaid, they're not getting what they should be from their employer, and having them get into a mindset where they can recognize the value that they're providing so they can go to their employer and get that $50,000 raise that I should have been getting, and that doesn't mean I have to stay there because they're giving me this raise. This is just temporary. And in 6 months, I might decide I want to go somewhere else. Getting over the fears that are holding them back from really creating the life that they want in their dreams. How do we create it? If you had told me 5 years ago, you're not going to practice peds ever again, you're going to go and speak to women physicians and help and coach and create this business and do this sort of work, I would have been like, there's no way. A, I'm scared shitless about talking in front of people, and B, I just don't imagine myself talking on a computer all day long and helping people. That's just not who I am. I'm very in the trenches and hands-on. And it's been a complete game changer when I start to recognize this is what I want to do and I'm doing something different. And I'm not beating up myself for not practicing clinically anymore. This is a choice that I've made. I am still a physician and I'm doing something else that I totally enjoy. So I think it kind of, I'm a little bit all over the place there, but it really is creating the results that each client wants based on what their goals are and their desires are. We can get them pretty much anywhere once they have that mindset awareness and shift.
Yeah, it sounds like it's recognizing your own self-worth, being authentic and true to yourself. You're not being a perfectionist and requiring everything to be done to 100%, 80% done is done, essentially. Just giving yourself grace on a lot of things. And the reason I'm curious regarding your goals, like say in 5 to 10 years, what are some of your goals that you want to see come into reality?
I would say, I think I want to just continue to grow my business. I enjoy my business. I enjoy doing one-on-ones. I want to keep it so that I am enjoying it as a mom and pop type of shop. I know a lot of people create their coaching businesses or whatever, and they want it to be huge and groups and hire coaches and all the things. And that's really not what I'm looking for here. I enjoy that authentic connection one-on-one with my clients, and that's how I want to keep it. So, I do have the ability to, in the fall with my son going off to college, my schedule opens up a little bit. So I'm looking forward to that, to be able to bring more people on. But right now I've been content with it just being exactly how it fits for me, for my lifestyle. And that's part of also like what I was saying about, just doing what you want authentically for you, because that's what ultimately is going to bring you joy, not worrying about what other people think. And, for me to go from doc to coach, I had to really not give a crap about what other people think. I wanted to do it because it was the right thing for me. Some other goals, I think I want to continue to talk and give my talks to women physicians across the country, hopefully across the world. Technically, it's been across the world, but maybe even more across the world. I'm going to launch a new podcast. My other podcast, Doctors Living Deliberately, I did. And that one we stopped recording in March. We kind of like had a year season of it. And now I'm going to launch a new one in the fall called From Pissed Off to Poised, to help women physicians who are really, really busy, who are just trying to figure out how to do all the things, but not be so reactionary when they do it. And then maybe do a group in the fall. We'll see. Fall or winter, start a group cohort for my private clients or group clients. But those are my professional goals. But yeah, I think that's all I need to do right now. That's already a lot, I think.
Yeah, it's already quite a lot. Or I mean, it could keep you. I mean, just even one-on-ones, I know they're really intense already
Yes.
to scale with your time. So
Yeah.
and I'm curious then regarding the process or the strategies that you can share. Let's say I might give some case scenarios depending on what your thoughts are. So maybe in my case, maybe I'll scratch my own itch. So you're reactive with your spouse. There's endless things to do in the household. A lot of times it's one, and it's not just my scenario, it's like a lot of scenarios I've spoken to my physician clients in the household. One person is doing most of the household management stuff, dealing with the kids, logistics, dealing with cleaners or whatever. Just logistics, that's there's like an emotional burden too to have to handle those. So anyway, there's a disconnect in terms of how much one person is helping versus not helping. And then, things become reactionary, etc. So I'm curious, what in your work with people who have issues with their spouse, what are some of the top three things that they can take action on after this episode to either gain awareness or to decrease their reactivity?
Okay. So, with our lovely spouses and partners, I think one of the first things that I start with is, and it seems really hard and impossible, especially if you're really ticked off at them, but can you remind yourself of when you first met this person and fell in love with them and loved them unconditionally like a puppy? Really, literally. Like when we were in love in that phase, they could do whatever they wanted, minus maybe cheating on us or whatever. And we would be like, totally, it's okay. I love you. How do you get yourself back to that place? Can you remind yourself that this human that you're with is there to love, for you to love unconditionally, no matter what they do? And that's a big piece to start relaying that groundwork. Because if we can't get to that, there's always going to be the anger and the resentment and the whatever comes up with it. The next piece of what I recommend to my clients is I want you to go to your spouse and have a conversation with them and say, I'm starting to do some work on myself. And I want you to just know that when we have an interaction that I see is going south, when we are starting to bicker or argue or fight, when I just notice that we're kind of in a pain body in a sense, I'm going to just kind of say, okay, I think I need a break. I need a minute and I'm going to walk away. And I don't want you to take that as a passive aggressive punch to you. I'm doing it out of love for both of us because I know the next couple of sentences probably are not going to be productive. So I don't want to make it worse. So having that conversation with your partner before, like when you're not in that funky, nasty part, really is so productive because you're both on the same page. You're recognizing that you're doing this with intention to create a peaceful space. And then the next thing, I mean, there's so many, but one of the other things I like is recognizing when we're making their actions or what they say or do an attack on us, like, or mean something about us. Can you just kind of look at what is the issue from their perspective? What if it has nothing to do with you? Like one of the things for me is like, why can't my husband pick up his clothes for God's sake? Like they're all over his closet. Now we've got it so it's all in his closet floor, maybe sometime in the laundry room, but they're not put away. My son's like this too. I'm like, why can he not do this? Does he not recognize that this is such a pain in my butt, that it's it's so messy in the house? Like he doesn't care. I have so many other things to do. I don't have time to pick up his clothes. We automatically make those things an attack on ourselves, right? What if it has nothing to do with us? It's not that he's trying to make me angry by leaving his clothes on the floor. It's more that he really doesn't care. It doesn't bother him. It's not a big deal in his world. And so I can choose to be upset about it and make it an attack on me, or I can choose to consider the perspective that this man just totally doesn't give a crap about the clothes on the floor and it has nothing to do with me. Which one leaves me feeling better, right? If we can get to a point where our interactions with our spouse, we start to drop the need to be right and correct about things because we recognize that that value of that intimacy in the relationship is the most important thing. That's what kind of gets us to that next level of being able to say, hey, I know what you're saying. I hear what you're saying. This is what I'm saying. I get your point too. Let's move on. Which things can you drop having to be right about to save the intimacy in the relationship? So there are lots of different things. That's just like the tip of the iceberg, but there's so many different ways that we can look at our relationships.
Yeah, I think for me, biggest takeaway, yes, definitely step away or take a pause when just drop it, like you said, because really a lot of times it's not that big of a deal. It's literally like 2 days ago, I was telling my husband something. I said a sentence, he heard me, and then I said the next sentence, which is a different topic, but then he zoned out and didn't hear it. I was like, I was still talking, but you didn't, you heard one topic, but once I switched topic, you just zoned out. Like, why? But anyway, you know, initial reactivity was, why was I unheard? Basically, like you
He's
couldn't.
not listening to me. Why did, yeah, like what a jerk. Why did he stop listening? Like he doesn't care to hear what I'm saying, right? And
Yeah,
it could be oh crap, I forgot to pay a major bill that's going to keep the lights on in the house. Like we don't know what's going on in their head when that happens. But the tendency is human nature to make it mean something about us. And the
Yeah.
majority of the time, it has nothing to do with us, you know?
It's not that big of a deal. I could choose at that time to just drop it. I'm like, okay, he didn't hear me. Repeat what I said. But that
Right.
time was like sleep deprived. I was tired. I was like,
Yeah. So even just giving yourself the compassion towards that, like you have that awareness that, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. It makes sense. So of course I'm going to be on edge and anything he does is probably going to tick me off. So let me just separate myself. What do I need? What does my body need in this moment to get back to a little bit more of a steady state? And how can I honor that? Super important because that's part of it too. As physicians, we don't know what our bodies are saying to us. We have no clue. Like we never ate, we never slept, we never peed. When we were in training, it was just go, go, go mode. And so we've not remembered how our body responds to things. And we have to actually relearn it, relearn to listen to our body, relearn to pay attention to the cues that it's giving us, and then honor that so that we can kind of be healthy.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. The self-care, having the grit to actually perform your self-care or being aware of your body, like you said, is super important. And a lot of times we forget that to put ourselves first. And like one of the goals I set for my clients, a lot of times it's like professional, 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 professional. It's like, what about yourself? So
Yeah,
that,
exactly. I have actually a talk coming up. I do a talk, it's strategies to living an intentional life. And the very first strategy, I say you get to pick your doctors. I know you're going to want to do all 10. You get to pick two. And if you're not doing the first one, that's one of the two. So you only get to pick one other one. The first one is how have you implemented or built in rest or me time for you? And that doesn't mean you're going to go to the spa or go and take a run. That means how are you resting, i.e., sleeping, meditating, whatever that really makes your body feel like you've recharged it. What are you doing for that? Make sure that's the number one thing you do every week for sure.
yeah, I agree. And then you work around all
Yes,
your, duties around that instead, like not
exactly.
ask your kids. Agree.
Right. You honor that commitment to yourself as the number one priority because we're so busy honoring the priorities to everybody else. We have to make that the most important priority.
And I am curious now that we're talking about this, what are some of your self-care routines or anything?
So I am a little bit older than you. I turned 50 in October. And what I realized, I was feeling like I was doing the Duchenne crawl up my body, like everything creaked and hurt, and I was just not feeling good. So I started doing yoga stretch, kind of little PT. I work with a myofascial PT doc, and I do that exercise for myself 20 minutes every morning. So nobody messes with me. Everybody knows if I'm in the room there, I'm doing my 20 minutes. I listen to an audiobook at the same time. So that's fun for me, bringing joy into it. I get ready and then I go and meditate for anywhere from 10 to 25 minutes every morning. And then I've started meditating a second time in the evening. So I am doing things that I know help me kind of settle my brain, that let me not have to think in terms of all the rat race to-do list that's going on. I get to focus on this instead. So those are things I do. I'm really authentic with regards to what I'm bringing in my life now. I know that there's a lot of pull, a lot of people want to get together, a lot of activities, a lot of different things. And I just really ask myself, is this an 8+ in my life? From a scale of 0 to 10, would I rank it 8+? Like Martha Beck talks about that. And if it's not, I say no. And I know people sometimes are disappointed in that, but I'm being authentic to what feels good to me. And that's what matters. So those are some of the most important things, I think, figuring out what you need in your life and making sure you're upholding and honoring that time for yourself.
Yeah, and talking about reactivity, when I was meditating more regularly every day, I could just let bad things would happen, or if you perceive it as inconvenient things, but you could, if I meditated consistently, then I would just let it pass and just let it go very easily. But if I
Yeah.
find myself, like right now, haven't been meditating because I haven't been sleeping, then I'm super reactive, like a lot easier to be reactive
Yeah.
so meditating to me helps a lot with that.
Oh, totally. Have you ever tried yoga nidra?
Yes, and I actually every night when I get up to pump and then when I have trouble sleeping, I play the 2-hour yoga nidra and then I fall asleep.
And you're out. Yes, that's one of my favorites. Like, especially when I'm really activated, or I can feel myself like a buzz in my body, like an energy that I don't love. That's my cue that I need to do something more deep state, meditative state. And I have absolutely loved it. It just feels like a pure zen. So highly recommend that for anybody as well. And that, you can start in the beginning, or you can start with just a basic meditation. I mean, if we're talking about this, I'll say a lot of people are scared of meditation because they don't understand what it is. They're like, I can't empty my brain. My brain is always full of the thoughts and the chatter. And meditation is just recognizing that those thoughts are there and then bringing yourself back to a focal point, like your breath or your heartbeat or something else. So it's a practice, not that you're supposed to make your brain clear, but rather refocusing on something else to allow yourself to have the break.
Yeah, and so for those of you guys who are not aware of what yoga nidra is, you can just Google it, NIDRA. You get very, very aware of your body. You could go through guided meditation if you haven't meditated before. I also do something called 6-phase meditation by Mind Valley as well. Tony Robbins has a priming one. That's a form of meditation as well to get you into a beautiful state. So, I mean, if you don't do anything else after this, just take one micro action and just Google a 1-minute meditation. That's
Yes,
so
totally. Totally.
and then I wanted to go into like a professional scenario. We can do a lot. I mean, it could be like, I wonder how perfectionism, I guess, for example, my perfectionism causes me to have expectations of people who help me and support me on my team. So I've had to let go of looking at the gap of what they didn't do and really look at the gain and how they supported me. And then also, like, if say somebody didn't complete something, instead of automatically having to go to it's their fault, but coming back to, did I give the instructions like correctly and things like that. So that's like an example of perfection. I'm wondering, is that kind of the perfectionism you're talking about, or do you have something else that
I
you're
Yeah, I think it varies for each person, like how it shows up for them. Like you were saying, there's two different, it sounds like one, they aren't doing their work. And number two, like, why are they not doing their work? And how does that impact me now, me having to go in and step in? And so with the perfectionism, the first question I always ask is, why is it there? Like, why do you feel like it has to be perfect? Why does it have to be this certain way? What are you afraid of is going to happen if it's not that way? Like, what's the problem here? And really first starting to figure out, because it's not just like one and done perfectionism, this is how you cure it and you're gone. It depends on what is the underlying kind of thoughts and history behind why you have that need to be and maintain that perfectionism, right? And so for me, for example, like it sounds like for you, it's these people are supposed to be doing this work and they're not doing it. And now I have to check in and I'm kind of irritated why they're not doing it. You have that awareness of, maybe I didn't explain it, but I want to go and ask you, why does it even matter? Like, what are you worried about is going to happen if it's not done perfectly?
wasting my time?
Wasting your time. Okay. And how do you know that that's even going to happen?
Yeah, I guess my thought process is usually like, okay, I wrote down these instructions. I try to be as detailed as possible. I come home expecting things to be done to save me time, but when it's not done, then it takes away time from me and having quality time with others. And yeah.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, so that makes sense. So you have a high value on your time. And so there's this urgency of what's going to happen if my time is wasted because they didn't do that. And so what is going to happen if they didn't do X, Y, and Z? Why is that a problem?
Yeah, most of the time it doesn't really matter. And like that,
Right.
it doesn't matter that he didn't get his probiotics for the day.
Yeah. I mean, in the grand scheme of things. So this is where we get to decide, do we want to take on this negative emotion that comes on, this frustration, the angst of it? Or do we want to kind of just say, okay, this wasn't what I wanted and it's not the end of the world? There's so many shades of gray in between. It's not one or the other. It's how you're choosing to think about it. For me, my perfectionism came from, I need to show up X, Y, and Z. We own this medical practice in the community. We are known in the community. And if somebody in the office doesn't do their job well, it's a reflection on us, i.e., people are going to think bad things about us. And so I had to do a lot of work to drop that belief that everything that happens in this office is a reflection on us, because it's not. It's a reflection on the whole team. And you're always going to have the haters. So even you can do everything that you wanted to do the best that you could, and people still may not be happy with it. So starting to like recognize where it's coming from for you, and then from there, kind of making some strides and some shifts on how we're thinking about it. And it's very, very individual with regards to what's causing it, right? Where it's coming from.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a little bit of like fear setting technique. I wonder. We often have this big fear of like, if we ruin our reputation, then basically our business will fail. Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like if my time is wasted, then I don't know, worst case scenario. But I
Yeah.
think we often don't. When you fear set, this is something I learned from Tim Ferriss. You basically go through the fear case scenarios and you think about risk mitigation strategies, and you really think about like, you can't handle the worst case scenarios. So if you have mitigation strategies, it's really not that bad. And maybe
Yeah.
another scenario would be I was really stressed out about this tenant I was evicting, and then also stressed out about property management company not, getting people evicting her fast enough and getting it rented out fast enough. Then I thought about the worst case scenario. I think I was like, oh, I guess I just have to pay like worst case scenario. Maybe I pay like 8,000 to cover the rent or mortgage or something. I was like,
Yeah.
all right, fine. It's fine.
Yeah. That's what happens. Like our brain, like we are like, oh my God, this has to happen. And if this doesn't happen, it's going to be the end of the world. But we don't actually solve for it. So that's part of with the coaching. Okay, let's just assume that happens. What would you do next? Right? It's kind of walking and stepping people through their worst case scenario to help them see, yeah, this isn't ideal, but I can figure it out. Right. And another big piece of it is this uncertainty. Like we don't like being uncertainty. We want everything to be mapped out for us perfectly. And that fear of the uncertainty is what leads us to constantly have worry. And that worry doesn't serve us. So really kind of honing into, I am ultimately the person that gets to choose how I want to feel about literally every situation in my life. And it boils down to, I get to decide that by how I'm choosing to think about it. Let me explore how I'm thinking about it. Let me explore worst case scenarios. Let me decide what I want to feel. And then how do I need to think about this to feel that way? And that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, that's very true. You're right. It's basically running the entire sim on
Yeah.
your scenarios like through, instead of just stopping by like halfway and then
Yeah.
like, you're spinning.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like that what if. It's the what if. That's another one of my favorites with my clients. They're like, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? I was like, well, let's shift it. Let's make it even if this happens, and then finish the sentence. And that gets you thinking more in a troubleshooting type of mindset rather than this anxiety mindset of the what if, right? So just these little tiny hacks for how do you shift the way you're thinking to get you in the place that you want to be.
That's great. I'm going to use that actually. Like even if instead of what if. Um,
Yeah.
I'm wondering also, do you have experience with any clients with due to stress that they have like a weight issue or overeating issue or anything like that, or is it similar to what you coach on? I'm just wondering, or do you have any strategies for that?
I don't focus on weight loss with my clients. I do have a couple of clients who would love to work on it, and I'm working on it with them a little bit with regards to recognizing, processing urges, working with desires. And so I tackle it from that standpoint, but I don't do a lot of deep work with, okay, let's get on a plan now for you're going to lose 30 pounds by the end of the month. That being said, starting to build the awareness around where you have urges and allowing yourself to just kind of sit and be in the urges. That's kind of like what I teach with regards to sitting and being with the negative emotions. That allows you to kind of like have that urge pass, and it doesn't feel good. That's the whole point. When we have an urge to eat a bowl of ice cream, we give into the urge to satisfy it because it doesn't feel good to just sit with the urge. So instead, can we start to learn to be uncomfortable with the discomfort of sitting in the urge, and it kind of goes away. And for me personally, most of the time I forget about it. So I do very light work with regards to that. But typically I'll send those to other coaches that are more in that field. I have a couple of favorites that I send for that.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm not talking about, the nitty gritty of like specifics on how to do weight loss, but it's how to address the urges, like you said, due to stress. And this can be, it doesn't have to be food. It can be any addiction, really. It could be
Yeah.
smoking, drinking, it could be anything. It could be wanting to work more,
Yeah.
to get away. So it sounds like it's just to recognize and sit with the discomfort of that urge instead of giving in and just
Right.
whatever that's in front of you. Because I know in the hospital there's pizza, cookies, candies, whatever, graham crackers, whatever they have in the doctor's lounge. I don't know.
Yeah. No,
There,
I mean, it's funny you said that because it's called, we refer to it as buffering. Like when we do something else because it temporarily makes us feel better than feeling a negative emotion. So when, for me, when it came back to the office, like I would overwork. That's how I would, that was my urge, was to overwork because I had to work to prove that I was bringing value. And so I had to recognize that. I slowly started recognizing I don't like working 5 times as much as I was working as a pediatrician, but I'm doing this because I don't want to feel the feeling of low self-worth, the feeling of not contributing to the family. So that's how I was compensating for it. So it's building that awareness of I'm doing this because I'm trying to avoid feeling this. What's the worst that's going to happen if I just sit in the feeling of not feeling good about doing this instead? Like, can I sit with it and allow it just to be there, that negative emotion, and let it slowly pass with time without acting on the urge? Right.
got it. And I know we, talked about many different scenarios, many different strategies and actions. If we were to leave the audience with, let's say, 3 takeaways or 3 action steps, what would it be?
Oh, God. We did. We talked about everything. We're all over the place. Okay, so my number one thing is really number one, recognizing and coming up with your compelling why. Like, what do you want to create in your life? And what's your compelling why behind it? Because until you know what that is, you're kind of going to be a wanderer. You've got to figure out what your purpose is from that standpoint. Number two is really listening to your inner knowing. And that's going back to being authentic and true to yourself. We do so many things in efforts to please other people or in fear of what other people are going to think about us or for whatever reason. Can you slowly instead just kind of tap into your gut and your heart and really know what you want to do and then create the courage and the desire to just move forward with that? Um, and I would say number three is just be a good human. There's so many people that are just not good humans. So when you're acting in your day to day, are you acting out of integrity? Are you acting the way you are proud of yourself for behaving? I think that's super important because it's kind of not always present with everybody. So I think those are the ways of life that I would say. And from there, if you're starting with that, you can kind of figure the rest of it out.
Yeah. So I would say like you said, figure out your why, being authentic, and then behave with integrity and character,
Yeah.
essentially. And, going back to authenticity, another spin on it that I talk to my clients about is not lowering your standards. That's
Mhm.
also being authentic as well. And trusting your intuition, like you said, like if you know that someone on your team, and for example, is not a good fit for you, somebody who's supporting you is not a good fit for you, but you keep trying to make it square peg fit a round hole because you're lowering your standards because it's in a way not listening to your inner voice, in a way not speaking your authentic truth, in a way, and people pleasing
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. Totally. I think you just have to pick, like in that scenario, you pick your discomfort. I can choose to not speak up and just deal with the headache of what is, or I can choose the discomfort of saying, this is not working. I think we're going to let this person go and have the discomfort of that. Like you get to pick your discomfort there. And then from there, which one ultimately has the least long-term discomfort for you, right? Just kind of analyzing it from that standpoint as well.
That's
Um,
true. Yeah, time, the discomfort times X exponentially, whatever.
yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. And, for the audience to find you in terms of, could you tell a little bit about what you offer in terms of coaching, the programs that you have, and where they can go to find you or contact you?
Sure. So yeah, my name is Arpita De Palma and my company is ThoughtWork MD. You can find me online. I'm on Instagram and Facebook. LinkedIn, I think, is Arpita De Palma instead, but the rest of them are ThoughtWork MD. Um, And I love doing the one-on-one coaching. I do a lot of one-on-one coaching with clients. I have a couple of packages with that. I also do group coaching for institutions, hospital systems, private practices. So whoever is interested in that, that is also all that information is on my website, www.thoughtworkmd. And like I mentioned, we have that podcast that is great content. If you're wanting to live an intentional life, we have a lot of guest speakers on there as well. It's called Doctors Living Deliberately. That one we finished recording back in March, but it's kind of evergreen content. And then the upcoming podcast is From Pissed Off to Poise, and that should hopefully be launching in the fall. So I'm excited about that too. So, but yeah, I would love to hear from anybody who has questions or anything about this. It's just part of living an intentional life.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, everything so far. We talked about multiple scenarios, multiple strategies, and I know whoever's listening to this, there's not a time where we can be perfectly non-reactive. So I know that they're going to benefit a lot from, our discussion together. So again, people go reach out to ThoughtWork MD, go to ThoughtWork MD and reach out to Dr. De Palma. And then just pick one action that you will do after this podcast instead of listening to absorbing everything and then let it pass and then nothing changes, right? So
super important. Start with minimum baseline. One thing. You pick one thing and start doing that.
Yeah, could be that 1 minute meditation, perhaps.
Yeah.
Or just go give your spouse a kiss and tell them plan of stepping away or something like that.
So I love you like a puppy, unconditionally.
And making a decision. Yeah. No, looking at old photos of when you guys went on your first dates, I think that helps too. Because I was looking at the photos 7 years ago. I was like, oh, it's kind of.
I did like you. I did like you.
Ago. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, so thank you guys again. And thank you, Dr. De Palma, for your time. Really appreciate it. And of course, everything that we talk about is going to be in the show notes on productivitymd.com. And just remember that everything we need is within us now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Disclaimer: this content is for general information purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information linked to this content is at the user's own risk. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical conditions they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. The views are personal views only and do not represent any university or government institution.